And welcome back to the Blue Corner. My name is Dennis, and today I am joined by a very special guest. He is the founder and brains behind the global brand of Wimp to Warrior. He's also the MMA editor of Men's Fitness Australia, and he's recently been appointed the president of IMMAF Australia. I'm talking about none other than Richie Cranny himself. How are you?
I'm good, Dennis. Thank you for having me. I'm impressed with your studio, by the way. It's very cool. I've been on many podcasts, and this is the most kit I've seen. But I knew that from our experience with you doing our production with Wimp to Warrior for so long, you'd have all the gadgets, mate. So thank you. I'm pleased to be on here. It's good to see you.
It's always good to see you, and it's been a while. We'll start on a personal level, just because obviously I just recently saw it on your Facebook. You posted a photo of yourself from 9 years back, and I will have to say it was before your SADA days, because you're looking pretty jacked. You mentioned there that obviously you've had a tough 12 months, mentally and physically. So, you know, can you go into that a little bit and let us know what was going on?
Sure. Look, I think everyone has those phases in their life. It's important. I think the reason I did it is because it's important for people, especially men, to talk about these things. And especially for someone that preaches mental health, and through the Wimp to Warrior program, a huge part of what we do is giving people mental strength to deal with their life and all the things that come as roadblocks and challenges in their life. So, you know, if you can do this, you can do anything. And it's important, although I don't like sharing this kind of stuff, it's important that they can see that someone that they might think wouldn't struggle with these kind of things, it's the coach, it's the guy that's started Wimp to Warrior, you know, success, all this kind of stuff. Even he has problems with mental health. And I think everyone goes through these stages, and I've struggled with mental health since 2005, actually. I've never talked about it, but that's when I originally injured my back. And I was out for 2 years and told I could never try and do martial arts again. And that was the darkest time in my life. And that kind of always comes back. And the last sort of 12 months, I've had challenges that everything sort of compounds with Wimp to Warrior and the growth and everything like that, and trying to do as much you can for that. And then with IMMAF and all the things I've been doing there, and we hosted and put on the biggest amateur event in Australian history, MMA event on the Gold Coast in March, and the work that went into that was insane. And then I got sick. I picked up whooping cough, and then it turned into pneumonia on both my lungs, and I got really sick. And then I was in hospital, and I was in the COVID ward, and then there was an incident where I had a heart problem. But so all these things, you know, that your health and your physical and your mental health aren't always separate. Your physical health has a huge effect on your mental health. And I think that we tend to treat the physical cause, you know, whether it's an injury, whether it's a sickness. But it's just it was a point where I had something come up on my Facebook page, and it was that picture, and it was me 9 years ago, when I had my gym in Sydney, and I was training all the time, and I turned 40, and I was actually going to have another pro fight. I was talking to CFC, and because my back was coming back anyway. It's a long story, but that picture reminded me of where I was. I was physically and mentally really strong at that point in my life. And shortly after that, I came up with the idea of Wimp to Warrior, because I wanted to give everyone else the feeling I had of I can do anything. I wanted other people to experience that. And I knew training in mixed martial arts can do that, because I've been doing it for 15, 20 years at that point. So that's how Wimp to Warrior started. But anyway, look, I take everything I do, I put 100% in. I can't do it any other way. I'm just not set that way. My brain doesn't work. I can't do something part-time. And my wife's always telling me, you take too much on, and, you know, I'll be okay, you know, it's fine. And you get to a point where it's not fine anymore. And, you know, you struggle to get out of bed in the morning, and you have dark moods and all this kind of stuff. And I've been seeing someone for a while, and it's fine, it's manageable. But I want other people to understand and know that it's okay to talk about it. And everyone goes through these phases. And, you know, I have support from my family, and which incidentally is if someone asks me what's the most important thing that you want to achieve in life, it's to be a good dad. That's and husband, but that's my goal in life. And, you know, I kind of got too caught up in, I want to make my kids proud. I want to build something to say that they can say, my dad did that, you know, and that became bigger than it should be. And I put my own health at risk. And also, you know, I didn't see my family a lot of the time. I was traveling all the time. I was training. I was asleep when I got home. I was too tired. I was burnt out. I was getting ill all the time. And this whole COVID thing has been an opportunity, I think, for a lot of people as well, because we've had more time on our hands to sit back and go, you know, what am I doing? And is this really the end goal? You know, I wouldn't change anything. If I went back in the time machine, I wouldn't change a thing, because everything that's happened has got me where I am today. And I'm privileged, and I feel bad about complaining about things, because I have a beautiful family. I live in a beautiful place in the world. I have a business. I've created a business that I love. You know, I'm the president of the Federation of Australia, the sport that I love. But we need to give ourselves a little bit of time sometimes, sit back and allow ourselves to feel, and, you know, and give ourselves some time to breathe. And I didn't do that for a few years. I was literally living on adrenaline. And then when I got sick after the event in March, I was out for almost 3 months. So yeah, that picture come up, and I basically said in the post that I've set myself a goal. I teach people goals all the time, and it's the same thing. You know, we've got to practice what we preach, look after ourselves. So I said my 50th is in April. So we're sort of nine months away or whatever to my 50th. And I want to be physically and mentally where I was when I turned 40. And that's the goal. And I wanted to put that out there and tell people that I've got a goal and I'm going to set it. And so many people reached out to me, you know, Coach, I'd love to do it with you. Let's do it online. And thank you for posting. Someone from Black Dog messaged me saying, thank you for posting it, because that means a lot from someone that has a following. So it was a selfish thing, but also, you know, from a coaching point of view, it's good to let people know that it's okay and we should talk about it and reach out, and it's the are you okay kind of thing. So, yeah.
Now, were you ever worried, like laid up, as you say, in the COVID ward with pneumonia? Were you at all worried that you had COVID-19?
I was. I mean, I didn't know I had pneumonia at the time. I was in there because they thought I had COVID. So I got sick. I was in New Zealand for the UFC. I was covering that, and I was over there for IMMAF. And then I remember I was at City Kickboxing with Eugene and the Winter Warrior guys, and it was the Monday morning, and I couldn't stop coughing, and I thought, oh, this, you know, it's okay, it's just a cough. Come back, and this is before the whole COVID started. This was sort of late February, and then I just worked through, and then I was getting ready for the IMMAF Oceania. We had 10 countries come in, and we were so lucky because it's just before the lockdown happened, you know. We had 85 athletes. We had a really big Australian team and put this huge event on. And I just kind of pushed through, but I started getting sicker and sicker. And then all the COVID stuff started coming out, and I was like, oh shit, so I better get tested, because I've been with all these people, and I was petrified that they'd come back and say, you're positive, because then I'd been with all these athletes from all around the world, and I thought, this is just a nightmare. And I was so stressed about it. So I went and got tested, and it came back negative. And I was like, okay, that's great. So I carried on, but I was still sick, and I didn't know I had pneumonia, and I didn't know I had whooping cough. And this is the thing, you know, I just pushed through. And then I got really sick, and then I ended up in an ambulance to hospital, and they said, have you been tested for COVID? And I said, yeah, no problem. I was tested in Woy, Central Coast. And they said, where? And I told them where, and they said, no, they're not been testing it right. And I was like, what? Because apparently, and I've seen it so many times, you see it on the news, and not so much now because I think it's all come out, but all these people in their cars driving through, and someone putting the old stick up around the nostril and coming out. And that was what they did to me, in the mouth and up the nose. When I was in hospital, they shipped me into the COVID ward, and that was insane, you know. and then they came and gave me the proper test, and that thing goes up your nostrils, right at the back of your mouth, and it feels like it's touching your brain. It's just horrible. And they put it around, and I was like, oh man, pulled it out, and then did the mouth, and then they did the second nostril, and then they were like, there was a couple other things that they wanted to test, but because I was in the COVID ward, they couldn't move me. And so long story short, anyway, I don't have COVID. I've been tested twice. Had pneumonia. This is my first trip from the Central Coast to Sydney for your podcast, mate.
I was, though, just getting worried. I'm like, oh, I hope he doesn't have COVID because I'm sitting right next to you.
No,
but
I'm good.
You've obviously got your goal at hand now for next April.
Yes.
Are you taking active steps to reach that goal? Like, what is your weekly routine look like now? Like, are you doing things like meditation, yoga? Are you training? What does your week look like these days?
Well, because I was so sick with pneumonia and stuff, it's baby steps to get back to where I was. My doctor's saying, do something. It's literally at this stage walking around the block with my dog. A few weeks ago, I couldn't do that. I couldn't even walk around the block. So that, and then just exercising. We're just doing a reno on a house at home. So I was digging trenches because we're laying the footings for, and one day I did that, and I slept for 2 days. The next day I worked for 3 hours in my garden, and I slept for 2 days solid. So it's just getting back into it. So I'm not on the mats or anything like that, nothing exciting. But slowly, I know how to train people. I've just got to put myself first for a change. I've been chatting to Rachel Guy online, who was, anyone that doesn't know Rachel, she was the original strength and conditioning coach in Wimp. She used to work at my gym. She's got a huge following on Insta. She's a great strength coach. And she trained me when I turned 40 and got me in that shape. And I used to train her in MMA. So she's in Dubai now, but we're going to do something online, and she's going to write me some strength programs. And so it's more about strength and conditioning for me, rather than being on the mat, because physically, with my back injury and stuff, I can't train myself hard in MMA anymore. My body just wouldn't do it. I can do it, playing around, a little bit of pads and stuff, but to get where I need to train hard. So that's going to be strength training. But I'm on the path, and I've told people now, so I'm going to put updates on, and I will put a picture of myself from last week, which I've taken a picture, and when I'm 50, and I'll have the comparison, and I'm very set that it will happen.
Now, starting with your coaching, obviously, Wimp to Warrior, as I spoke to you earlier today, the story of the creation of Wimp to Warrior has been out there for quite a while. You've spoken about it many times, so I don't really want to touch on that, but I do want to touch on, it beginning as a program to find one fighter, train him for 6 months and having him to a fight, to now what it's become now, which is a totally different kind of program, really, right? Because now it's more about, I guess, going back to what you were just saying about your health issues, it's about changing people's lives. It's not about making that one fighter. At what point did the program, I guess, switch from finding a fighter to changing people's lives?
So it was never about finding one fighter. It was about finding one person that I could get to a point where they could fight. And that was purely about showing people that anyone can do MMA. That was the whole point of Wimp to Warriors. Take someone that you'd never think would be in an MMA gym, train them, show the transformation, and then they get to compete. But it became more about the transformation of people's lives rather than growing the sport. It's still both very important to me, but that became a real driving force for me, probably after the second series finale. I think the first series finale was amazing, but I changed the program up a little bit for the second one, and started to work on a bit of the mind space stuff, strengthening the mind and doing, a lot of the stuff that you guys went through with me, being the visualization stuff. And I really started to see that mental fortitude people were finding through the program. And that was like, wow, it's always about teaching them martial arts and getting them to step in and showing people and ideally filling up MMA gyms around the world, because they see this, if he can do it, I can do it. And that's why I did it. But when I started to see the transformations that people were going through, not physical, That's amazing. Anyone can get physically fit, but it's the messages that people were sending me after the program of how it had changed their life, the life of their kids, the perception the kids have of them, fathers doing it for their kids to show them anything's possible, young mums, single mums doing it for their daughter to say, women should be empowered and look what your mum has done. And, and people that are, tried to commit suicide, the darkest of dark, we've had them all, and when I really started to see that side of things, that's when I really started to think this is amazing and we can really help a lot of people with this program, as well as growing the sport of mixed martial arts, which was the whole premise. But that became my key driver. And, and I still get messages now from people that finished the program a month ago, but people that finished it 5 years ago. I had one yesterday from a guy, he was our oldest guy in Belfast at the time, not anymore. And he just reached out to me and just said, just to give me an update. He saw my post and said, Coach, thanks again, know that you mean so much for all these people, but let you know this is still having a huge impact on my life. And so that's really special to me. And that is the key driver for the program. Now, I think that's what makes our program so special. But yeah, it's
and has it outdone your original expectations? I mean, obviously now you've probably got different goals that you want to achieve. But what I say by that is, you say you always wanted to fill gyms around the world, but looking at some of the gyms that you have, whether it be SBG with John Kavanagh or even TriStar, did you always think you were going to make it to those kind of like gyms? And yeah, like, did it outdo your original expectations?
100%, 1,000%. I was a fan of MMA since the day one. I started training in the mid-90s. So TriStar was like GSP was like my favorite athlete ever. I remember I was following him online, and I remember him coming into the UFC. If someone had said to me, 8 years ago when I came up with the concept, this program will be in TriStar, it will be with John Kavanagh SBG, it will be in all these famous gyms, kickboxing. I mean, a lot of these gyms weren't around then, but for someone said to me, you'll be in the 5 biggest MMA gyms on the planet, working with the best coaches in the world, I would have never believed them in a million years. I still pinch myself that these coaches are running my program. It's something I'm hugely proud of. But yes, it's way bigger, and I couldn't have done any of it without the team that we have at Wimp Tour anyway. I mean, end of the day, I'm a coach. I'm not a businessman. I've never have been. I'm very creative. I have great ideas. I have that entrepreneurial spirit. I've had my own businesses since I was 18. But to grow a business, you need business people. Kelly and Nick they're the real structure behind this, and I always kind of feel guilty when I'm asked to go on podcasts and talk about Wimp Tour. It's amazing and people congratulate me, but I could never have done it without these guys and the people that have worked for us now and previously, but most of all, the people that do the program as well. I always say to people, they thank me, and I say, don't thank me, I thank you, because without people signing up to do the program, there is no program. So it is something that I will always be proud of. It's something that I will always be able to look back and say that program. And also for me, I helped grow the sport of mixed martial arts, amateur level. And that was the whole point of doing it in the first place.
And when you place job adverts for Wimp to Warrior, is part of the whole process that they have to go through the Wimp to Warrior program? Because I know that majority of the people that work for you or work with you, I should say, they've all done the program themselves. So is that actually a thing, like a part of the job interview process?
It was until about a year ago, and it's but you get to a point where you need specialist people. And we have offices, around the world now. We have people working for us in the UK and in Ireland, in the US. We have a president of our company in the US, Scott Viscomi. So there's only so many things that you can do. And like Scott Viscomi, for instance, he's been a martial artist for 20 years. He can't go and do the program. He'd be too experienced. But it's important for us that people understand what the program's about. That's the most important thing, because we're not out to become this huge blue chip company. We're about getting more people into the sport of mixed martial arts, helping people transform their lives, and putting money into the sector, because there's so many gyms that we deal with now that people see these super gyms now and they think they must be raking it. Most gyms don't make money. They people that own gyms do it because they love it. They love giving back to their local community. They love martial arts, and so they want to do that for the rest of their life. It's nothing to do with money. So for us as a business to be able to pay that gym's rent for a year or more and pay their coaches by running our program, that to me is super special. And that's really, Nick Langton, who's the CEO, he came through the program and was the original investor, and then he came on and left his high-powered job 2.5 years ago, and to help run and build the business. That's his passion. He's the real B2B, what they call, business to business, because he loves the idea of growing the business of MMA and monetizing it, because it's so hard to monetize a gym, especially if you want to run it as a proper mixed martial arts gym. The sport's very big. There's lots of people watching the sport, but there's a lot of growth to do, and that's why Wimp to Warriors, and that's why IMMAF, and trying to get more people to recreational MMA, train for fitness, train for health. It's not about just pro fighting. That's not what the sport is about.
And having a massive history of coaching yourself, and then obviously being the head coach for the original few series, how hard was it to? I guess you didn't step back, but you changed your role, right? So rather than being a head coach of series, you're now a guest coach that travels to multiple series. But how hard was that? And I only ask because sometimes, when you see professional fighters and suddenly they get released by the UFC or whatever, a part of their identity kind of gets lost as well. Did you have the same problem? Like, did you feel that some of your identity of being this head coach, left when you kind of moved roles, and how did you deal with that?
100%. And I don't want to keep going back to it, but that's part of this mental battle I've had, with my mental health for years, because when I injured my back, I was told I could never do it again. And it's always been my thing. I opened my first gym in 1995 in London, and it's all I've ever done. And it's always, I believe, I've ever been good at. I left school with no qualifications, learning difficulties. So I became a martial artist, and, I was so afraid when I injured my back that, what am I going to do now? Where's my identity gone? It was the thing. I was this black belt martial artist, I used to fight and teach, and then it's gone. That's my identity. You're exactly right. And I felt empty, and that was a huge struggle for me. And then when I got to a point with Wimp to Warrior, it's kind of 2 points. It's not because I just traveled, but I got to a point where my back, I had an operation. I've got disc replacements and bars and stuff in my back. I knew that I was on a clock. I'd get to a point where, day-to-day coaching just isn't. I can't do it physically, and I want to give people the best I can give them on the mat. And I got to a point where I couldn't do that anymore. So that was very hard for me. But traveling to gyms and being the guest coach, is fantastic. But the biggest thing I miss is the connection you have with people that you train. Because when you guest coach, you go to visit people, it's, people excited to see you and you train them, and I love it. But I'm so jealous of the coaches that are there on a day-to-day basis that have that connection and see people's journey, because that's the thing I miss. I miss seeing someone on day one and then what they do on the Wimp to Warrior program at the end of that, and knowing that you had a real part of their journey it will literally change their life, and being involved with that journey is something that's the biggest part I miss. I really do miss it, and I miss it now, and I miss it every day. And I call myself the international head coach, but realistically, I don't get to coach that much anymore, and that's something that does really bother me, and it's something I still deal with daily.
And I guess with all the series that have gone around the world, you're kind of privy to all of them. What are maybe 2 or 3 of the most kind of inspirational stories that you've come across that really, to this day stick with you?
Sure.
And I guess for anyone sitting on the sidelines, sort of, whether they want to do it or not, is there's something you can kind of say on that regards to kind of push them over the edge?
I thought you could ask me like one or two of my favourites. And I was no, it's in the gyms and series, which I would never do.
No, not at all. But I mean,
I understand, like a strong story that's been motivational to me. There's been a few. There's one that always sticks in my mind because I got very emotional reading a letter out from this person once on the mats, and I did it for a specific reason. I think it was like Series 5 in Sydney, and when I put on the series, I wanted to give people the ultimate experience. That was me as a coach. I want to have given the best coaches. I used to brought Jens Pulver over. Mark Hunt, Richie. My God, my brain. Richie Walsh. Sorry, Rich. I tried to get as many people involved because I wanted people to not just think it as a training program, but a real experience. And that went with the finale as well. And I put on at Luna Park. It's huge expense, huge stress. So that was that, and I've lost the question now. What did you ask me?
Just like a couple of your most inspirational stories.
So coming up to the finale, it would cost so much money putting on a finale at Luna Park. And if there weren't enough tickets sold, it's a massive problem. So this particular series, I was so stressed. It was a few weeks out, and it was going to be a huge loss for the finale. So I went in and I was driving in, and in the morning I used to wake up. I live on the Central Coast. I'd get up, my alarm would go up for 3 a.m. I'd have a shower, breakfast, and then I'd drive in. And just before I went, I checked my messages, and there's a guy in Ireland, and I don't want to say his name. He'll know who I'm talking about. He was on Series 2 or 3 in Dublin, and he reached out to me before he started the program, and basically he sent me a picture of himself, and it was this white Irish kid who looked sort of 18, 19, really puffy, not a hair on his face, obviously going through chemo. And then he sent a picture of himself a year before, and he was this really good-looking, athletic kid, amazing hair, and just fit and training in the gym. And you look at that picture and you think this kid's got his whole life in front of him. And then there's this picture, and he said, Coach, I hope you don't mind me contacting you. A friend of mine is doing the Wimp program. I'm currently in hospital going through chemo. I just want you to know that I've set myself a goal that I'm going to beat this cancer, and I'm going to do the Wimp program. And that blew me away. And there was a lot more context to the email and the message, which is personal to us. But the fact that he was using the motivation of doing the Wimp program to really focus and beat the cancer, because I truly believe, and most people do, that you need to have a positive mindset when you're sick. Sickness, stress, it brings sickness on. Cancer, so many cancers are caused by stress and anxiety and all this kind of stuff. So he really needed something to get him through, and he put my program as his motivation, and that was hugely positive to me. And then he came out, he went through cancer, through his chemo, came out, he did the next program, and I followed him. I went over to Dublin and met him just after the tryouts, and we got a picture taken, and before and after, and we've stayed in touch. And he's getting married. He got married, actually. He invited me to the wedding. I couldn't go, but his story is so special to me because Wimp Warrior had a huge impact on him before he'd even stepped on the mats. And he says that he might not be here if it wasn't for Wimp Warrior. And so that letter, I read that letter in the morning of, I got to the gym, and I wanted to try and explain to the people on the series how special their finale needs to be, and it will be something they never forget, and they're privileged to be in this situation to train, and they want all their friends and family to be there. So I read this letter out from this guy in Dublin, and I got hugely emotional, and I struggled to read through it because it meant so much to me, and what I was trying to impress on them is is this program, the way I got to feel about this program, it's not about fitness, but it's almost like a medicine for mental health. It's allowing people to really focus and change the way they live their life. And that particular one, I know I go on because I could talk about this guy forever. There's lots of tangents to go off about our relationship now, but he was a huge motivation for me, and it's something I'm very proud of. But I mean, I've had people that message me and say, I'm on the program, I'm in this country. Before 2 weeks out from the program, I brought the pot of pills, or I've had a gun laying on the floor and I was going to commit suicide, and I was living in, there's all these stories, and they're all very special, and I don't like picking one out, but that one to me is very special because the impact it had on him before he even started the program.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is. I'm very privileged to be in the position and people to send these kind of messages to me. It means the world.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It really is. I guess we'll move on. But before we do, just because we are still in that kind of COVID space, and since we're talking about Wimp to Warrior, I just want to quickly ask you on a personal note, what was harder, starting Wimp to Warrior and seeing your family every weekend, because I know you were sleeping in the gym, or being in lockdown where you're with your family 24/7? Because I know like some people are going crazy when they're locked up in home. Which one's tougher for you?
I love my family, my kids. They drive me crazy sometimes, but this COVID thing has been really good for me. You know, we talked about it from the mental point of view and just to refocus. But my wife Zoe is amazing. We've been married for over 20 years now. If it wasn't for her, Wimp to Warrior wouldn't exist, because she's been paying the mortgage for 8 years. You know, I'm not this. People think, oh, you started Wimp to Warrior, you must have a private jet. No, I earn more money doing personal training. You know, I do this because I love it. But my wife has been the you know, bringing in the money each time. She cut short her maternity when we had kids during Wimp to Warrior to go back and to enable me to chase and follow my dream of this program. But she, for the first time since Wimp to Warrior started, she's been able to work from home, and to see her at home and spend time with the kids, because she'd leave home at 6 a.m. Monday to Friday, and she'd get home at 7. So I get up, get the kids ready, put them on the bus, feed them, out, work all day, visit gyms, come back, get the kids off the bus, feed them, shower them, get them back, bedtime stories, homework, and then my wife would walk through the door. I'd be exhausted, wouldn't really be in a mood to talk, and our relationship was always, we're kind of ships passing the night. But since this COVID thing, she works for Toyota in Sydney, she's been working from home, and she works harder at home than she does. But to see her and us to be a unit, a family for the first time ever, and spending time together has been amazing. So there's part of me that doesn't want it these restrictions to come off on a purely personal and I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, for me, it's been great.
I mean, it's a classic example, as they always say, for every successful man, there's an even stronger woman behind it, right?
Yeah.
So we'll move on now anyway to men's fitness. You're obviously a writer for men's fitness. How long have you been doing that for, and what are some of your highlights?
So men's fitness, I got into men's fitness because the editor, Todd Cole, he used to train at my gym in Sydney. So we got chatting, and I used to train him MMA, and we kind of got this friendship. And at the time, there was no MMA content in Men's Fitness magazine, and that was just general. There was anything that made the papers in MMA back then was negative. You know, this fight, the big national papers hated having any content of MMA, and if it was a negative piece about human cockfighting and all this kind of stuff. So I was chatting to Todd, and I was trying to get him to have more content or have something on there. So at the time, Shannon Pontin did a Q&A, and he's the coach at the time for Biggest Loser. Also trained at my gym, good friends with Shannon still now. Hey, Shannon. And I said to him, look, he was doing like a fitness one. I said, look, can I have a column of that Q&A? People can write in and just ask questions about MMA training and what it can do. And that's how it started. And I pestered him. So I got this little column to start. And then we did a feature. I did a big feature in there about MMA after we had our first UFC in Australia. And then that kind of relationship built from there. And then the highlight for me was the Ronda Rousey cover. So up until then, there's never been a woman on the cover of a Men's Fitness globally, not just in Australia. And I had this idea of putting Ronda on the front cover. And I said, you know, it'd be great. It would be something that people talk about. So I messaged Todd and I said, look, this is the idea. Ronda's coming over. It's good. The biggest UFC ever. She's fighting Holly Holmes in Melbourne, the biggest attendance. You know, it's going to be huge for Australia. Let's put Ronda on the front cover. And he was like, oh, I don't know. So he had a panel of advisors. So they talked about it and it took about a week to come back. And in the end, he said, let's do it. And I was like, right, this is it. So you'll know, I contacted you. I said that. So we went to the hotel where she was staying and we interviewed her. We did videos. You did these amazing clips for social media. And we had Ronda on the front cover and it went viral. And there were media outlets all around the US and in Europe, you know, the New York Times, The Guardian, loads of online publications were contacting Men's Fitness saying, this is amazing. Can you talk about it? So Men's Fitness are over the moon. And that's kind of, then Todd was like, okay, you're now my MMA editor for Men's Fitness. So that was definitely a highlight. But I've done interviews with Mark Hunt. I've had Robert Whittaker on the front cover as well when he had his fight with Israel back in February. Was it February? Yeah. So yeah, look, it's not something that I do. I'm not particularly good at it because like I left school with no qualifications. For me to write an email, it takes me an hour because I go back and I have dyslexia and stuff. So, but my wife proofreads it for me. But the passion that I have for the sport comes across, and so it's something I love doing, and I love going to the UFCs with accreditation and being on the front row and watching the fights and stuff. I don't have it anymore because since I became president of IMMAF in Australia, they said it's a bit of a conflict, president, you know, and you're a journalist writing about the sport, so I have to be more neutral. But yeah, it's been great, and I'd still do stuff for them. If there's something big coming up, I'll contact Todd and say, look, this is coming up. It's Australian MMA. I'd love to talk about it more. I've been pestering him to have something in there about IMMAF and the Australian team for a while. So I'm going to have to, reminds me, I'm going to have to call him up. So if you're watching, you're going to get a call soon. But yeah, look, it's again, it's just a way of getting MMA content. It's that next level, the mainstream. People that read Men Fitness probably aren't training in an MMA gym. Not back then anyway. I'd like to think they are now. So it was just another way of showing what this sport can do.
And just going back to the Ronda one, you obviously went in there with a lot of nerves.
Yeah.
Was that more so because you kind of feel like a lot was riding on it because Todd took a chance by featuring a female athlete on a men's, I guess, magazine? Or was it more so that it was Ronda Rousey?
It was Ronda Rousey. You know, I'm always, at the end of the day, I'm a fan of the sport. What Ronda had done up to that point was amazing. I mean, she was the first woman to fight in the UFC, the first ever fight, first champion. And I'd followed her in Strikeforce and before that, and I'd written about her as well a few times for other magazines and online stuff. So I was a huge fan of Ronda. And then well, you'll know, I mean, I was blushing pretty much the whole way through. I mean, it was a standard interview. It was in a hotel room and it was on her sofa and she was sitting on the sofa with her legs up under a blanket and I was sitting next to her and I was like, you know, and she's a beautiful woman and I admire what she's done. And, you know, my wife knows this. I mean, she's very attractive and she was very accommodating and, you know, look, I'm nervous even talking about it because I know you laughed at the time. And I said to Ronda at the time, am I blushing? And she was like, yep. But yeah, that was really cool. And she was very sweet and very accommodating. And like I say, it's a great thing to have Ronda on the front cover and say that, you know, it's one of those things I'll be able to say that was me.
And talking about MMA in the mainstream, do you feel like we've reached that now? Obviously, we have made leaps and bounds, you know, with UFC now with the ESPN deal and stuff like that. But even to the point, I think it was after the Tony Justin Gaethje fight, I think they even ended up on Channel 10 News after that fight. So do you feel like we are mainstream now, or do you feel like there's still a while to go or way to go?
I think you've got to kind of separate what mainstream is. I think in terms of media, definitely 100%. I think the fact that we've had a great ambassador for the sport in Robert Whittaker, former champion and still competing, and he is a real ambassador for what we do. And then Israel in New Zealand, champion now. So it's because of the success of our region, Australasia. It's kind of forced it into the media. But in terms of mainstream, for me, the sport isn't about pro fighting. That's the pinnacle of the athletes. That's where the athletes go to earn a living. The sport is about the everyday people training and competing at amateur level, or not even competing. And that, to me, isn't there where it needs to be at the moment. People still look at the sport and they see these athletes in the UFC and think, I would never want to do that, or I can't do that, or that's too violent. But there's a whole other side of the sport at amateur level, which gives people so much, just like the Wimp program. And when people finish the Wimp program, I don't want them to stop doing MMA. I want them to carry on and become martial artists and continue training. So, it's not where I want it to be. It's every country is a little bit different. I've got some big plans for Australia now. I'm the president here, and things that I want to achieve. But we will get there. I think in the next probably 2 to 3 years, I'd like to think that we'd be a big participation country of the sport of MMA.
So, and I guess that's where IMMAF comes in now. So you're the president. When did IMMAF originally sort of come about? What is the purpose of IMMAF? Yep. And when did you join that team? So
IMMAF's been around for sort of 7 years now. They're the governing body of mixed martial arts in the world. They are the governing body. The UFC go through IMMAF in lots of countries, and they put on the events. They put on the referees and as a sanctioning body and a governing body. But their main purpose is to legitimize us as a sport. It's an amateur body, and there's lots of things that they're doing for that. It's stuff I'll touch on in a minute actually, but their main purpose is to get us recognized globally as an amateur sport, and then ultimately allow athletes to compete in the Olympics in the sport that they love of MMA, their chosen sport. And there's no reason why that won't happen. There are people that are trying to block it from happening, and we can talk about that. But that's the main premise of IMMAF. They're the governing body of our sport globally. They have federations all around the world. I think there's over 110 countries now with federations under the IMMAF. I was asked to get involved. I met Kerith Brown and Denzel White, who's the president and CEO in Vegas, a couple of years back. We went out for dinner with John Kavanagh and Nick Langton, and we just got chatting, and I told him about where Australia is and what I want to achieve and what I'm doing with Wimp, and they asked me to get involved in Australia. So I came on as the vice president, and I put a lot of new things in. Brought a lot of new vision, and they saw the drive and the things I've done with Wimp, and so I made a lot of changes, and I was then voted in as the president in October, I think, or August last year, which is a huge honour, and it goes back to that time of how am I going to do this? My wife's like, you're not going to accept it, are you? How are you going to fit this in? But you kind of make it happen. But it gives me the opportunity now to really, I've been building a really solid team of coaches and administrators, and I put on my first event for IMMAF, which was the Oceania, biggest one they've had, and we've got a solid national team now. So, but I want to build grassroots. I want to monetize gyms. I want to get governance. So when someone's competing as a mixed martial artist in Australia as an amateur, they should be able to go anywhere around the country and compete under the same rule set. That doesn't happen at the moment. Okay, they should be able to go to somewhere and know that the referees or the people that are looking after their safety are qualified. That doesn't happen at the moment. There are some amazing referees and judges in Australia, but there's no governance on a federal level. So it's, you go to here, you go this rule set, you go up to Queensland, you know, there's no real governance there at all. There's no combat board. You come to New South Wales, we're so fractured as a sport. So what I want to do is to get Australia recognised as an NSO, a National Sporting Organisation here. That will eventually get funding for our federation, and we can then help pay for our athletes to go overseas and compete and stuff. But also the other things we're doing is we're running coaching accreditation courses now, referee courses, timekeeper courses. So people, there's a set standard. So when a gym opens, they can say, you know, all our coaches are recognised by the global body of MMA. There's a qualification there, and there's not at the moment. You know, anyone can teach MMA at the moment, and that shouldn't be the case. People should be qualified through, they should understand how the body works. They should know basic first aid. They should know health and safety, and then how to coach and teach people, because it's not just a case of I know how to do it so I can teach someone. It's not. There's lots of different ways of teaching people and basically instilling knowledge. Everyone's different. Everyone retains information differently. And there's a skill to coaching. So we want to have a structure globally, a system where you can come through so an athlete can become a level 1 coach, which basically means you teach as an assistant in classes and beginners. And then you have level 2 and level 3, which goes up to elite athletes. And there's lots of sports science involved. And so our sport is as proper structure and governance, and that's throughout. And
so is that going to be like a grading system like you see like in BJJ? Because the same thing there, you know, you train in BJJ, and once you get, I think, to purple belt, you start taking that sort of assistant's role in teaching some of the younger people and stuff like that. So is it fair to say it'll become something like that where there'll be a grading system?
Yes.
Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's happening now. So Australia was the first country to launch it. I launched it here as a trial on a few gyms, and the grading system. So everyone calls it a belt system. People understand it more because it's a martial art, but we don't wear belts. You know, it's like jiu-jitsu where they have no gi. You can have a coloured rashi and stuff. But there's a system now in mixed martial arts that's evolved through amazing coaches around the world that you progress. So rather than, at the moment, the hard thing to keep people in MMA classes is if you're not fighting, what's your goals here? You know, you've lost the weight. What do I want to do here? And as a sport, we lose a lot of people in our sport to jiu-jitsu and to Muay Thai because people want to compete. People want to test themselves. And we need to be able to facilitate that. And we need structure, and we need to have a system where it's fair when people compete. And in jiu-jitsu, for instance, you know, you compete against other belts of, you know, white belts, blue belts, etc. And that's the system we're bringing in. So we've got this syllabus. There's an amazing app. Anyone can download it off the App Store, but you can't use it if you're not under a coach and stuff. But it has all the videos, all the syllabus, and the coaches can grade and give students feedback within a class scenario. He can be there on his phone watching someone running takedowns, and he can look at them and go and score that takedown. And rather than interrupting the class, saying, "Stop, Johnny, that was great, really good," and then after the class, Johnny looks at his app, training class. I was there. Our coach watched me. He's given me this score on all these techniques. This one I need to work on. So it's direct feedback. So there's a lot of technology now in our sport, and this app is one of those things. So we've launched this system as a trial. There's been part of the whole Olympic push. There's been a coaching commission started. It was introduced late last year. There's all sorts of commissions you need as part of the Olympic progression and being recognised as a sport, and one of them is a coaching commission, and there's 7 coaches from all around the world. I'm on that coaching committee. I was honoured to be asked to be the chairman, and we're actually fine-tuning that syllabus at the moment. So there's going to be a second phase, a relaunch. So we run it for 6 months or a year. this didn't work, that doesn't work. But the beauty with MMA is it evolves constantly. There's always new techniques coming out. There's always new systems of training. So it's not, I came through traditional martial arts back in the day, and it's almost like this is what you train. This is how you throw a punch. This is your kick. This is your block. And you learn that. That's your black belt syllabus. And there's no evolution. Whereas MMA is constantly evolving. So the beauty thing with this system is we've got this commission and the coaches talk and they get feedback, and every year we tweak things and it just changes it live on the app. So the techniques switch around if need be or replace. So it's a really exciting opportunity for coaches to get involved and students. And there's a progression system now, people to help people motivate to train and set goals if they don't want to compete.
And for the athlete side of things, is it just on a national level or is it on a state level? Like how does it work? Like obviously you had the Worlds where they compete, but like how do you form that national team? Is it a matter of, you know, having state competitions and then the winners progress to a national team, or is it tryouts in each state? How does that work? How would I, not myself, but how would somebody get into, say, the national team? So
when I got involved with IMMAF, so 18 months ago, the first thing I did was start the coaching courses, but then I brought in tryouts, so state tryouts for our national team, and it went really well, and that's how our team went to the Worlds last year. Everyone came through tryouts. So basically, but you know, there's a lot of people that fall through the gaps there. You know, we do a tryout in Queensland. Queensland's this huge state, and there's gyms all over. We do the tryouts in Brisbane. There'd be athletes that don't hear about it. So, you know, there's a lot of it is contacting gyms and coaches and people hearing about it. Coaches contact us. There's a registration on our website, which is immafa.org. You can go in there and register your interest, and we can send you information. But basically, we're looking for not just athletes that are ready for the Worlds, but we want athletes that we can talk to their coaches and really work with them and bring them up over the next 3, 4, 5 years. You can compete in IMMAF from the age of 12. Very different rules from adults. You know, there's no headshots until you get 18. It's very restricted, but we want kids to come through and have this safe pathway. As a mixed martial artist, it's not about becoming a professional fighter. 0.1% of people that do our sport will become pro. We should be able to provide, you know, recreational training. And then if they want to compete, you know, there's state competitions where they can go in. It's amateur rules, you know, very, very safe, and have that experience of competing. And for me, the most important thing is learning how to lose, to build confidence and come back and adversity. So that's something that I'm very passionate about, and we're really pushing. And 2020, not only are we going to have a really big national team for the Worlds, but I want to have state competitions, and I want, it's a whole nother conversation, but I want MMA to come out of the cage and onto open mat as well, at amateur level. I think there needs to be a progression. I think the first time you compete in mixed martial arts shouldn't be in a cage. It just shouldn't be, especially kids. There needs to be a progression. They need to do mat-based competitions, and then it builds up and you get to a point where you've got this amount of experience, and then you go into the cage, and then you still under restricted rules, and you build yourself up. You know, you look at any other sport, you don't just go straight and play in a stadium. Five-a-side football, and then, you know, and go-kart, kids don't get into a Formula 1 car. They start go-karting, and then they progress to Formula 3, Formula 2. This is, for us to be a proper sport, we need this kind of system of progression. And these are all the things that we're working on.
And I guess, as you said, it's not about getting them to the pros, but for some people it is kind of that key to the pros, because I saw that one of your recent champions signed with Bellator, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's many athletes in UFC at the moment, and Bellator and other big pro that have come through IMMAF. And John Kavanagh said the other day, in 5 years' time, every athlete that signs to these big organizations will come through IMMAF, you know, because back in the day, you know, there was no amateur MMA. When I come to Australia, there was no amateur MMA. It was semi-pro or pro, and it was pretty much the same rules. There's no structure of continual learning and evolving as an athlete. But this system, we've got guys coming through that have 30, 40 amateur fights. It's like boxing, you know. but you need to be able to look after those athletes. There need to be proper governance for those athletes. So at the end of their amateur career, if they want to turn pro, they're not broken, They haven't gone down the pathway of taking PEDs and all this kind of stuff, because IMMAF are completely govern all this kind of stuff. You go to the Worlds, look, if you're a promoter and you want to sign, there's two kids, let's say two 20-year-olds, okay? One's been competing on the national level around, let's say in Australia. They've been competing and, he's got a good record, but then one's come through the IMMAF system and he's been to the Worlds. He might not have won the Worlds. He might have got silver or bronze, but at the World Championships, these athletes fight 5 days in a row. 5 days in a row. So they get there, they weigh in, and they have to weigh in every single day, every morning, make weight. So there's no weight cutting. These kids, they weigh in the morning and then they get on the bus and then they go and then they compete. And if they get through, they go back, hydrate, eat. Next morning, they get up, they have to make weight again. You talk about a lot of athletes, they say the hardest thing about camp is making weight. These athletes do it 5 days in a row and they compete 5 days in a row. So you're looking at these two kids, similar records. This one's been on the national level, competing against and this one's been competing with the best in the world and has fought 5 days in a row, made weight. This kid's going to be a much better bet. This kid's never going to back out of a fight if he's just going to be tough and he knows how to make weight and he's had that structure. And that's why so many of these promotions now, you go to the Worlds, there's scouts there for the UFC, there's Bellator all the time. And if you win the Worlds, you're going to get several contracts offered to you. So it's an amazing pathway. And that's why the UFC are one of our biggest sponsors and they pay for they give a lot of money to our federation to help us do all the things we need to do. So, we just need to get more people behind it.
And talking about the Worlds, how lucky were you to squeeze one in just before this lockdown?
Oh, I know, yeah.
And any idea of when we'll see the next Worlds? Or is it going to become like a national thing until they start opening borders?
Sure.
Or what's the kind of plan with IMMAF like heading forward?
So the Oceania, which was on the Gold Coast early March, wasn't the Worlds. It was our regional international. So the way that IMMAF work is they have every region has their own international. So you get fighters come from all around the world because they want to compete and they want their rankings to go up. But that's a regional one. So the Oceania, which happens every year, and it's the first event of the year. It's early March, and then then it goes around the world. You have the Asians, the Americas, and the Europeans, and so on. So, but yeah, we squeezed one in. We squeezed ours in just before the COVID just went ballistic, and all the planes shut down, and there was no international travel. So it looks like ours. So the Worlds is going to be in November, and we're training at the moment. I've brought in some new coaches, and I announced that Brian Ebersole, probably the most decorated and experienced athlete, MMA coach in Australia, is now the head coach for our team as well, which is really, I feel very blessed, and he's a great guy. But we're putting together a team, and we've got our trials coming up. We're announcing dates soon, as if the Worlds are going to happen. We're telling ourselves, because you can't train and then hope. You have to tell these athletes, this is the date. And I believe the Worlds will happen. I don't think every nation will be there, because some nations, if there's a problem with COVID at the time and they go backwards, they might get banned from travel. So the Worlds will happen, but all the other internationals haven't happened. Like the Europeans is massive. That was it is what it is. But it looks like the Oceania will be the next one. So the Oceania will be the only event within a 12-month period, which is a shame, but it's also which will be in New Zealand. But if for whatever reason, if something really bad happens and we go backwards, the Worlds don't happen, then I've spoken to our guys in New Zealand, and we're going to put on an event, because it's Australia and New Zealand, we're above the world in terms of the whole COVID thing. So we will have an event regardless. So our athletes, if the Worlds don't happen, we're going to take them to New Zealand. We'll have an international, and they still have something to train for, and get their points and have a bit of a run out and have an event regardless.
All right, and I guess before we start wrapping up, obviously you're sitting in front of the MMA as a sport.
Yeah.
I saw a campaign going on or a petition going on at the moment. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? And also, I guess my question on that, because you always see these petitions going wrong, like, is it actually valid? Like, what are the importance of people actually signing these things? Because sometimes I'm like, are these signatures actually being heard? Like, so yeah, if you can just...
Sure. 100%. It's every signature counts. So IMMAF is based in the UK. And to get in front of, I don't know all the ins and outs, but to get in front of, like, for instance, the sports minister, to get an audience with these people, you have to have a petition of over 100,000. If you have over 100,000 people sign a petition, then the doors open and you can then speak to the people relevant to your cause. So yes, 100%, every single signature helps. All of my social media, if anyone goes on or go into IMMAF website or IMMAFA, it literally takes 10 seconds. It goes in, you write your name, click, accept, and it's basically saying that you believe MMA should be recognised as a sport. So that campaign is very, very important. So please, anyone watching this, please, if you like MMA or you want to see us, or if you love MMA, just go on it and just sign it and share the graphics as well, please. But yeah, there's a lot of people that don't want to see MMA in the Olympics, for instance. And what we're trying to do is the pathway. There's things you have to go through, processes of recognition to get to the Olympics. And there's in the Olympics, they have categories, and there's a combat sports category. And if a new one comes in, one has to go out. So with MMA, because it's so popular as a professional sport, and everyone kind of knows the UFC globally, there's a lot of worried people in the sport, in other combat sports, that have that position in the Olympics, or they could get it the following Olympics, or they're in the conversation. Boxing being one, judo's a huge one. They don't want MMA in the Olympics. So there's a huge pushback, and these are people that have been around and have a lot of influence. So there's this continual battle with our team at IMMAF in UK, and they're doing an amazing job. And there's court battles, etc., to get people to listen, because there's so much infrastructure going into our sport now. We've ticked every box and some to be where we need to be in the discussion. And they're coming back with all these ridiculous excuses. So it's a process. It will happen, but the more people we get to sign on, MMA is a sport, and hashtag it as well. Please, from me, please sign it, because it's super important. Because without this, if we get recognised as a sport, governance has to be there. It's infrastructure, so the athletes get recognised. You're working in a particular sport. That's when there more money comes into sport, because sponsors come in. I talk to sponsors all the time, trying to get people to sponsor our national team. These kids give up. People don't know this, but not a single person in IMMAF gets paid. I do this job for nothing. We pay our own flights. We pay our own accommodation. These athletes do GoFundMe site pages. It's amateur sport, but let's give them something. Let's help these kids, because they're not on the streets. They're learning martial arts. They're becoming really fantastic athletes and ambassadors. They're putting the green and gold on, for God's sake. We need to put some money into it. But when you talk to these companies, if you're not an NSO, they're like, well, it's an excuse for them to say no. So there's a lot of passionate people that are pushing hard, but we need people to get behind it, and it takes seconds.
All right, and just before we do go, I just want to bring up the fights that we've had, obviously, in the past, I guess, months since the UFC's back. Yeah. I just want to bring up a couple of fights, which is, obviously, I just want to get your take on from a coach's perspective.
Sure.
The first two fights I'll kind of bring up is Anthony Smith and Max's fight, and how you feel about, cornering, when's the right time to kind of throw in the towel. And I only say that because the weird thing that I've kind of realized is, in MMA, I find that a lot of coaches aren't throwing in the towel, or not as quickly as you would, for instance, see in boxing, right? Yet I find that taking a loss on your boxing record is a lot worse than taking a loss in your MMA record,
sure,
right, to bounce back. So I was just wanting to get your take on those two fights. Do you think they should have been called, or how would you feel if one of your fighters, I mean, in the Anthony Smith fight, it was losing teeth and things like that, and in the Max's fight, it was about him sitting on the stool, basically, I guess, not begging, but like telling his coach to call it multiple times. What's your take on that?
I mean, firstly, it's a very valid point about boxing and MMA. You can lose in MMA, and it's kind of expected. It's how you evolve. It's how you get better. In boxing, it really hurts your career. But people do throw the towel in a little bit more in boxing. But there's nowhere to hide in boxing. If you're an athlete in boxing, someone's trying to rip your head off, and all you can do is cover up or throw back. So there's nowhere you can smother the person and get your breath back and recover. You can get concussed and they stand you up, do an 8 count, and you're back in again. It's a whole different game. MMA, you can wrap someone up, take them down, or lean on the fence, and you can recover. And so there's times where you think a fighter can be out, but he can recover. There's ways of doing it, and that's a lot of things as a coach you talk about. There's safe places. Rest, breathe, tie them up if you get rocked. So it's different. It's very hard to compare the two sports that way. But in terms of the way I personally look at it is, it's so hard to talk about a particular case, because coaches have a good coach will have a long and very intimate relationship with their athlete, and they know that athlete inside and out, and they've seen them in the gym go through real tough times or previous fights, and they know if that individual can get through the other side or not. So the coach is in a position where we can't really, it's very hard for us to go, they should have stopped it, because we don't know what's happened before. We don't know if the athlete said, don't stop this, I've got a plan, I'm going to look really tired and I'll wrap them up and I'm going to drag them into deep water, which a lot of fighters do. They lose the first 3 rounds and then they win late on, and that's just the way they train, and that's their kind of that's what they do in fights, and coaches know that. But at the end of the day, it's not the coach's job. I don't believe it's the coach's job to throw the towel in. It's the job of the person that's looking after those two athletes, the only person in there, which is the referee. That referee is, and look, referees get stick sometimes for stopping fights too early or stopping fights too late. But that's their job. They're assessing that fighter on the way they're responding, the way they're moving, the way their eyes look. And it's their job to say, stop or continue. And we need to, if we take that power away from the refs, it becomes a grey area. So it's from a fan's point of view, you can look and go, that coach should have thrown a towel in. And look, I've cornered hundreds of amateur fights, and I've only thrown in the towel once, and that was Wimp to Warrior. That was the first series of Wimp to Warrior. One of the girls didn't have a match up, and I brought someone in from Perth who agreed to do the fight, but she was way more experienced, and it got to a point where she was just getting lit up, and she'd had the experience, and there was no need for her to continue on, so I threw the towel in. But it's very hard for a coach to do that, because you're kind of telling your athlete you've given up, or you don't believe they have it in them to continue, that's something that from a relationship point of view, it's going to take some time for that to work out. And the athlete might go, you don't trust me, you don't believe in me, I'm going to go somewhere else. And that's not an excuse. I'm not saying coaches shouldn't throw the towel in because they're scared of losing their athlete. Coach's job is always has the best intention. It's all about the athlete. That's what it is. But I think it's not the job of the coach.
And I guess that makes sense for Max's fight, because it was just a case of Max just, I guess, felt mentally he was out of the fight.
Sure.
His coach was trying to, egg him on to get back into the fight. With Anthony, he won that first round, but then he literally dropped the remaining rounds, and most will argue he even dropped them 10-8s. Like you know, he was taking a beating. He was picking up teeth off the ground, handing him to the ref, and the ref was putting him in the pocket. Like, it was just to a point where, I don't know, me personally, I think whether it was the ref or whether the corner should have jumped in, that fight went on way longer than it really should have or needed to.
Sure. I mean, that's a real extreme. And, you know, I guess to have this conversation, we need these things to happen. But it's so hard. And this is what I mean. It's really, if I was coaching, I probably would have thrown a towel in. You know, if I don't think my guy is in there and he's going to take damage, then I personally would. But I think it's very hard for people to sit and watch it on TV and say, he should have done that, because you don't have the relationship with the athlete. You don't know what they've been through before to get to this point. You don't know what they have in them. So it's a tough one. And I think it should be more on the referee. They should be, if someone's losing teeth and they're not responding, it should be stopped. And it's the referee's job to stop that fight. That's their sole purpose as a referee, is to look after the athletes. That's it. You know, they don't care about who wins, who loses. Their job is to make sure that those two athletes stay healthy. And
then I guess good coaching, and then there's the alternate coaching, which is the Diego Sanchez fight, where he brought I don't even know what it was, a spiritual coach in or something like that. And then I guess last weekend with Mike Perry just bringing in his girlfriend. What are your thoughts of that? Like, how important is it to have a good corner, or do you find that, I guess in Mike Perry's, he's like, look, I do all the work. I'm the one in there. I don't need someone telling me what to do. How do you find on those kind of stances? Like, do you need a good corner? Is it valid to have a good corner, or do you feel as well that a lot of the work has been done, so theoretically they can go out there and I guess just do what they want to do?
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, you've been there, you've done the walk, you had a real hard start to your fight. It's coaching, and especially in a corner, it's not about instruction. It's about letting the athlete know that you're there a lot of the time. And if you go in knowing your coach is there behind you, and it's the person that's trained you and you feel comfortable with, and you know they've got your back, and if you get into deep water, there's someone there that's going to help you. It's more of a mental thing, really, to know that you've got a really good, caring coaching team around you that's there in the corner experiencing it with you. And if Mike Perry, I know for a fact Mike Perry hasn't got a team at the moment, he's between gyms and stuff, that's why his girlfriend's there. If he was fighting for the title, there's no way his girlfriend's going to be there telling him what to do. But he felt comfortable that he was at a point where maybe he thought that he was super confident with that fight. He didn't have anyone else, and he wanted someone there that would give him that comfort, you know, and someone that he wants to see, and he would calm down between rounds. And a lot of the time, that's all you need is a corner, is to have that relationship, tell them to breathe, you know, and then if there's something you've picked up, if you give them too much information, they're not listening. You know, it's got to be simple, calm them, breathe, you're doing great, you know, peck them up, give them a bit of a pep talk if you need to, you got this, and send them out. That's it.
I guess it's also, I mean, he made a point because he watched one of the earlier fights and he said, you know, like, one of the corners was giving their fighters a real hard time because they weren't in the fight and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, as a coach, you should be picking up your fighter regardless. You should pick him up. Where, you know, a lot of the times I've even said, like, I would rather the coach be honest, because I also find it really weird. I mean, going back to Ronda Rousey, I found there was, I think it was even the Holly Holm fight where, you know, the coach is sitting in the corner going, you're doing great, where obviously you weren't. So, and I guess it goes back to your original point, each coach needs to have that in-depth relationship, because I think some fighters, they just want to be prepped up regardless of the situation. Yeah. And then other fighters probably respect that honest opinion a little bit more. Yeah. And I think, again, it's the coach knows what the athlete needs. You know, if you've got an amateur fighter that's really inexperienced, they've never been in deep water before and they're losing, but you want them to have that experience and you want them to get through it. You know, the coach might say, you're doing it, because they need to know. If you tell you're losing this, you know, you've got no chance of winning, just hang in there. That might kill that person and the fight's over. But you'd expect someone that's fighting for a UFC title to be able to take on constructive criticism and know and be told the truth. To be at that level, to be told that you're doing really well when you're not, that's bullshit. You know, you need to say, you know, move your head, you know, use your distance or whatever. Something needs to change.
And as a coach, you have to give them a tool to make a change. And most coaches, you go in there with a solid game plan. If this happens, we're going to switch it to this. And it's just a case of reminding them, okay, we're not doing so well. We need to wrap them up and take them down. You know, and it's got to be as simple as that. The coaching needs to be done before the fight. You know, the thing that I always tell with Wimp with coaches is, especially for their first fight, you see coaches out the back and they're teaching them or critiquing their punches before they walk out. That's the worst thing you can do. They're going to go out on my cross it's not working. You tell them they have the hardest strike ever. They hit the pad, my hand's going to break. You know, you're ready. All you should be doing is filling that person with confidence. You got this. I'm here. Go and do it. That's it. Critiquing someone out the back before they go out is the worst thing you can do. But you got to, again, it's a relationship you have with the athlete. You know what they can and can't take. And that's why it's so important for someone that's cornering. You can't just come in and corner someone. It's even if you know that guy, it's very hard to corner someone even if you haven't been at the back with them warming up, because you don't know how much they warm up. Were they stressing out about something? You know, you need to have that whole journey with that person. Sometimes you can't do it, but the journey of arriving, weighing in, and being at the back, making weight, warming that person up, seeing how they're feeling, and then assessing from that point, I need to perk them up a little bit, or I need to bring them down a little bit. All these things, it's a process. And then so long story short, it's very important to have good coaches in your corner. I've had a situation where I had no corner, my first pro fight, and my coach was fighting through my coach and corner was 2 fights previous, and he was so bashed up he couldn't come out. So I had his dad, and I had no relationship. It was terrible. But that's an experience that I've really embraced, because as a coach now, I know what not to do. And I think that's really important. Coaches learn from their own mistakes, and then you try and teach and instill better knowledge and systems so they don't make the mistakes you make.
Well, there you have it. Well, I do really appreciate your opinion on that. We will wrap it up now, but I'll give you a final chance just to obviously let people know how they can contact you, whether it's for a personal level, whether they want to look into signing up for the Wimp to Warrior program.
Yep.
And how they can contact you for, I guess, the IMMAF component as well, whether it is
Sure.
like for trying out for the national team or whatnot, or even for the, as you say, the coaching programs.
Yep.
So yeah, if you can just let us know how people can
Sure.
reach out to you.
So Wimp to Warrior is just wimptowarrior.com. Our website's on there. It has all the gyms that run our program around the world, so you can just look up your local gym if you're looking to do it. All the information's on there. There's loads of videos and testimonials. There's lots of stuff on social media. Our Facebook page has got loads of videos. IMMAF in Australia, so our website is IMMAFA, so IMMAFA.org. You can go on there. It has all our news, our events, and also our Facebook page as well. So so if you want to reach out to me, it's just Richie Cranny on Facebook and Instagram as well. But please, if you're watching this, take 2 seconds to go on and just sign a petition. Go on my social media, or just go on IMMAF's website, immaf.org, and just sign it for the sake of our sport and the athletes and the longevity.
Well, there we have it. As I always say, I appreciate the time that you've come in and had a chat. I think we've covered a lot of areas of the sport and the progression. And I look forward to getting you in once again once the, I guess, the borders or the COVID finishes, and we'll get you in for another chat for any other updates. But until then, that is it.
I'm a one.